Hi everybody, today we're going to take a look at some of the muscles of the human body. These are skeletal muscles that are mostly superficial, so we don't look at any of the deep muscles, but it's still a good list to take a look at it. Please make sure you guys review your assignment online and make sure you guys are also familiar with the actions associated with each muscles listed here. So let's go ahead and get started. So looking at some of the facial muscles, we have the muscle that basically covers the frontal uh, bone and the occipital bone. This is one muscle connected with a broad tendon on the top of the skull called the epicranium or epicranial aponeurosis. And the part that is covering the frontal bone is called the frontalis or the frontal belly of this muscle. And the part that's covering the occipital bone is called the occipitalis or the occipital belly of this muscle. The muscle that covers the temporal bone is called the temporalis. And we have two circular muscles, one that's found around the eye and one that's found around the mouth. If it's around the eye, we refer to that as orbicularis oculi. And if it's around the mouth, it's referred to as the orbicularis oris. Again, break down the word orbicularis as in circular, oris as an oral mouth, and then oculi here would means ocular or your eye. We have a muscle that extends from the zygomatic bone, which is right here, called the zygomaticus. This is a two-headed muscle, basically, but you guys are only required to know the general name, which is zygomaticus, rather than knowing the specific name, zygomaticus major and minor. You have a large muscle on the side of your face called the masseter. This is basically what helps you move your jaw during the chewing action. And then you have one muscle that starts from a bone behind your ear called the mastoid process. And it goes down, and you don't see it from this view, but it connects to the sternum and the clavicle bone. So the name of this muscle is sternocleidomastoid. Looking at some of the muscles of the abdominal cavity, as well as I'm going to kind of identify some of the facial muscles as well. Actually, let me look at this one first for you guys, and then we'll go back. So again, you have the frontalis, you have the orbicularis oculi, orbicularis oris. Right here is your zygomaticus, right here on the, again, this is your zygomatic bone. And right here, that's your masseter that's going to move your jawbone or your mandible. The one on the side of your head is the temporalis muscle. And right here, which is also labeled in the previous one, is the one that comes again from behind the ear and connects to the sternum and the clavicle. And this muscle is called the sternocleidomastoid. In the chest area, we have the large muscle that covers basically majority of the thorax called the pectoralis major, and a triangular muscle that covers the shoulder area called the deltoid. Looking at the muscle of the arm, if you're looking at the hand in this position, which is a supine position, you have the muscle called biceps brachii. Please do not just call it biceps, because all biceps means is that means the muscle has two heads or 2 points of attachment, rather than having an actual identification of a muscle. For instance, later on you will see we have also a muscle called biceps femoris, which is associated with the femur. The muscles that are located on this side of your hand are flexors. Basically, they're going to help with the action of flexion, as in decreasing the angles of your wrist bone, allowing again for you to bend your wrist. The muscles are found in the central part of your abdominal cavity. These are referred to as the rectus abdominis. And on either side of the rectus abdominis, you have your external oblique. Now, in this model, I don't depict the next layer of the muscle. However, if you were to dissect a human cadaver and look and remove the top layer of the muscle on the lateral aspect of the abdominal cavity, underneath these external oblique, you have another layer muscle called internal oblique. So external outside, internal inside. So both of these are oblique muscles. Looking at the muscles on the anterior of the thigh, so you have, again, if you kind of work out and you're familiar with some of the names, the muscles on the anterior aspect of the thigh, what's called the quadriceps or quadriceps femoris, which basically means it's made up of 4 muscles. 3 of these main muscles are superficial, as in you can see them by just looking at the regular view of the thigh. And these 3 muscles are the central muscle right here called the rectus femoris, and 2 muscles on either side of rectus femoris. If it's on the outer side of the thigh, it's called vastus lateralis, and if it's on the medial aspect of the thigh, it's called vastus medialis. So this is the 3 of the 4 muscles we identify as quadriceps. The 4th one, which is not labeled here, is if I remove the rectus femoris, underneath that, you have another muscle called vastus intermedius, which is again the 4th muscle of your quadricep. That is a deep muscle, and it's not going to be visible on the superficial view. You have this narrow muscle that goes from the external aspect of the hip to the internal aspect of your knee. This muscle is called the sartorius. And going farther down, on the lower, on the leg, you have your tibia visible here. And there's a muscle that partially covers the tibia, and this is called the tibialis anterior. If I take a look at the posterior view of the trunk as well as the legs, one of the main muscles we have, as we've seen earlier, is the muscle that covers the occipital bone called the occipitalis or the occipital belly. You have this large diamond-shaped, almost diamond-shaped muscle in the back. Oh, sorry, not that. I guess trapezoid-shaped muscle on the back called the trapezius. The muscle on the shoulder, which we already identified as deltoid. And now we're looking at the back of the arm. So you have the muscle called triceps brachii. And then going down to your forearm, these muscles are called extensors. And these are the ones that basically allow your wrist to be extended. So flexors are on the other side. We talked about them earlier. So these are your flexors. And on the opposite side behind that, you have your extensors, which are basically, again, reverse the action of your flexors. You have this wide muscle that starts from the lower back and then tucks in underneath the armpit. This muscle is called the latissimus dorsi. And again, going down to the hip region, you have the large muscle called the gluteus maximus. And on the side of this more lateral view of the hip bone, you have the muscle called gluteus medius. The muscle that form the posterior aspect of the thigh are generally referred to as hamstrings. Hamstrings is made up of 3 main muscles. On the lateral view, which is right here or right here, you have a muscle called biceps femoris. Again, this implies that it has 2 heads, but associated with the femur. You have on the medial aspect of the thigh, on the superficial side of it, you have what we identify as semitendinoses. And partially visible from underneath the semitendinoses, you have a smaller, not a smaller muscle, partially visible muscle called the semimembranosus. So these 3 muscles, biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus together form what we identify as hamstrings. And then this muscle that forms the back of your leg, which is basically what we identify typically as your calf muscle, is referred to as the gastrocnemius. And this muscle is connected to your foot and your ankle through this very pronounced tendon called the Achilles heel. So if there is any damage to this, you have a difficult time basically moving your leg or creating any type of flexion or extension with your ankle. Okay, that is it for the name of our muscles. Again, please make sure you guys go to your Canvas, download your file for muscular system and complete the assignment and submit it through Canvas as well.